Annyeong, it's Mikey here, and today we're coming back with another keyboard video, and this time it's the SF60 from Chilkey. Now, this is an interesting board because it's a almost full metal keyboard. The switches aren't, but the case and the keycaps are. I'm really curious about this one because it seemed very interesting, and they are using really nice switches in it. Now, I know I made an announcement before on my Discord that I wasn't working with Wuchi Studio, Chilkey, or Melectrix anymore. That was just due to a lot of communication issues that was occurring. This time around, their communication has gotten a lot better, so I wanted to give it another chance and see what it's like, especially when this board seems quite interesting and the pricing wasn't that crazy either. So let's go straight into the unboxing, but please make sure to like and subscribe. Now let me introduce you the Chilkey SF60. So we have to thank Chilkey for sending me out this board because I was quite curious with this one. Now, as you guys may have known, I haven't worked with Chilkey in a while, and this one is their newest release with a quite interesting value-wise board because it's got a lot of stuff to it. Now, overall, the packaging actually feels quite great. I'm gonna be honest with you, it kind of reminds me of like the paper series boards that they've done. So this has their newest Wuchi Studio Hall effect switch, which is going to be the Poseidon. There's also the diamond switch, which this one doesn't have the diamond, but I wish it did. Overall, this switch is supposed to be a deeper switch, which I think is quite interesting, and curious how this is going to sound with this whole board. Now, in terms of the accessories, you have a very decent cable that comes with this board, and just your basic keycap or switch puller. The cable is braided, but I would say that it's just an okay cable. It doesn't feel like something special. Honestly, I do keep wishing that a lot more companies did the USB-C to C with an adapter to make it a USB 3.0. They do provide a manual inside of the box as well, so you do have a manual that allows you and tells you what you can do with this board. Also keep in mind that this board you can actually open up the software using FN plus tab. Now overall, the whole case itself actually feels very, very nice. It feels like more of a premium build comparatively to other things that I've seen before. I think they did a great job with this case, and I actually love the design of it. Some people might not, but I think it actually looks and feels quite nice. Now overall, the metal keycaps does feel pretty smooth. Doesn't feel like you're getting like that metal touch feel as much, and I think they did a good job with the finish of this. Now of course, we're gonna have to weigh the board before we go into sound tests. And this board is going to weigh a total of 1.4 kilograms, which is a decent weight to this whole board, but not that heavy. Now the next thing we're going to do is going to tear down this board. So to open this up is very simple. There's only 4 screws in total. It's going to be on each corner, and it's going to be the star-shaped screw. So we're just going to open it up and see what we get inside. So one thing I've already noticed with the whole top case is it actually feels quite nice as well. Very, very premiumly built. I think really Chilkey is upping their builds. Like I remember the Slice 75 and I remember it being a very nice build as well. Now there is a status sheet there. So Wuchi Studio actually mentioned to me that it's important to keep it on the board just because it's safer that way. I don't think it really is that necessary, but better to listen to them than not. Now overall, you also see the foam that's also adhesive on the back. It's not as bad as like say the Melectrix or Wuchi Studio boards that I've seen in the past, but I honestly don't like it being an adhesive. I think it should just be a separate piece completely. Like there is no reason it has to be an adhesive. Now in terms of the LEDs, it's going to be south, so it's going to be south facing, so just keep in mind it is silicone gasket mounted. I do plan to remove the silicone gasket on the spacebar portion just because the mounting styles in general for custom keyboards, it does sound better when you do not have anything on the spacebar, so we're going to move that there. Now in terms of the stabilizers, it is plate mounted stabilizers. They're decently lubed, but the inside there where the wire goes into the stem housing is not the greatest, so you might add extra lube there. Now in terms of the PCB end plate, they are both 1.5 millimeters, so that is quite nice. In terms of the case, you'll notice here that the actual GH60 USB port section, like the Wu-Tang Raka, is not the same, but there is a portion that actually caves in there. So that makes me think, if I can get an adapter, I can actually use this case with other PCBs. And this case actually does feel quite nice that I might want to do so in the future. Now, one of the things we're going to do to mod this board is a tape mod. So what I'm going to be doing with a sound test in terms of the mod wise is going to be a few different things. One, we're going to try removing the tape mod, removing foams. So that's one sound test. We're going to do it with one layer tape mod to see if it helps with the hollow sound in general with this board with all the foams. And then we're going to also try using different keycaps. So I think different keycaps will also help as well. And we're going to also do a different switch. I think overall, this board did sound hollow, as you guys would have heard. And I think it's not the greatest sound, but it's not horrible. Like if you are coming from a really cheap budget board from before, this might sound really nice to you. So we've done the sound test and then of course the teardown, my thoughts specifically on this board and the things that I noticed just from that. Now, one thing, the quality of the case is really nice. I was actually quite surprised with the specific quality of their case. It's a very nice case. It's designed quite nicely and overall feels really hefty. Feels quite nice inside of your hands. Now, one thing I noticed right off the bat, the USB port does not fit the same in terms of where it's located, like Wu-Tang, Venom, Raka, things like that. So GH60's kind of what GH60 has become now. This one doesn't actually match up with that. That I think is already honestly a disappointment. I was hoping that this is gonna fit and match up because overall, this case is actually quite nice, and I would have loved to have used it and just see what it's like to kind of play around with it a little bit more. So that was a slight disappointment. Now, in terms of the metal keycaps and the sound profile, honestly, the metal keycaps I think was not the play with these specific boards. The reason why I say that is that it provides a hollow sound to it. So with the hollow soundingness, like you can hear, the metal keycaps really do have that kind of hollowiness to it, and I think that was a slight misplay. In my opinion, this is just my honest opinion. Now, I may be wrong. Some people might think differently than myself, but Wuche Studio makes their own PBT keycaps. If Wuche Studio used their PBT keycaps on this, I think it might have sounded a lot better. That's just my honest opinion. That's my own personal opinion. Might not be correct, but I think in terms of value and everything, it could have maybe come out a lot nicer with this, with the sound as well. We're gonna see how it comes out, and I would love to hear what your guys' thoughts are. So let's go into that, and of course, more in-depth details with gaming and software with this board. Now, in terms of how loud this board is, honestly, it's not the loudest board. Now it's gonna be more of like the metal sound from the keycaps that's actually making a little bit more of a loud noise with this board. It does provide a bit more of a hollow sound that'll pop out of it as well. You can see here, like, it did jump quite a bit. I am hitting the keycaps quite hard, and I think the decibel reader is actually catching a lot of that metal sound from the board, and it's not crazy loud. Like, the switches itself feel quite quiet in general. Now in terms of the backlighting, as you can see here, it is decently bright. Now, is it as bright as say a Wu-Ting, or say most recently I did like the M-Chos or different keyboards before? It's not as bright. It does have this really nice RGB that comes through the bottom here. I do like how that looks. I think they did a really great job with vents there in terms of the design, but keep in mind the lighting is not going to be as bright as you might look and see in this camera here. I do love how the lighting on the top comes out. It doesn't seem very bright, but you can still see it. Now, a few things that I noticed with this board that I want to point out. So the USB ports don't match up with, say, like Wu-Ting. Overall, I do feel like the case is very well designed for a pre-built, and in general, the keycaps is actually a very well done keycap set where the metal doesn't feel really rough or anything like that. The side profile, I think, looks really cool. The back design as well, quite well done, even if you don't look at it. The switch itself, it's not well lubed in terms of how consistent it is, but the sound-wise is okay, but it does have a hollow sound. Now the spacebar does have the foam in it, which is nice for metal sounds, and the backlighting RGB is quite cool. Overall, the front profile I think is quite comfortable to type and play games on. I would highly recommend removing that mount in the spacebar section. As you can see here, I think it is possible, if they provide an adapter, to use this with other like PCBs out there. It would be really cool to see and try this. Now going into the website and the pricing. So it is $179 USD. You do have 4 different colors to choose from. I have the silver one. I think the silver is probably the best one out of all of them. It just provides a really nice clean look to it. The overall metal keycaps is really cool. They do have a promotion going on, but there's also vendors out there that is selling the board as well. So you can always check out those vendors too. I think the precision metal keycaps is quite nice. It doesn't feel like some of the older keycaps that I've tried before, where it feels like if you get sweaty hands, it kind of gets sticky or like rough on there. It doesn't have that kind of feel to it. And the switches is okay, but not the greatest thing from what I see. Now, in terms of the software can actually be opened by pressing FN plus tab. Keep in mind this. Now, the software itself is a little bit buggy in terms of the trigger settings. So like when you click on it, it can actually move to the direction you might not want it to, and then you might have to redo it. They suggested pressing the plus minus to get a little bit more accurate settings that way. So keep in mind that it does have the travel test, which is good. You also have the rapid trigger section where you can actually choose a little bit better rapid trigger settings for the switches. You also have many switch choices here that you can use for calibration, which is very nice to see. And they have even different brands as well, which is, I think, really good, and really shows that they're making sure that this is going to work well with, other switches out there. But keep in mind that this is a universal software that they actually skinned over with their own skin. Now, you do have a lot of RGB options. You can also customize the colors as well. So it's not going to be like, oh, all is one color or it's preset colors, but you can actually custom choose the colors. One of the weird things about the software though is the ones that you clicked is not going to change, and it's not going to lock that, and it's only going to change the ones that are not selected. So that's a little bit of a weird thing that I think. Keep in mind this though for yourselves. If you are trying to change the RGB, that you're going to have to select the ones that you don't want changed and then unselect the ones that you want to have changed. So keep in mind these specific settings, but it is nice to see that you can customize each individual color in this, because I think that is one of the nice sides of using kind of a good software. Now, in terms of the actual changing keys, you actually do have a profile key. So this is one of the most important things that I've ever mentioned in terms of Holophonic keyboards, is that every single time you need to have profiles. Profiles is a mandatory thing because you want to have different profiles for different games and typing. Your really low actuation, anything under like 1, is going to be really tough to type on. I've tried it and it doesn't work. Now you do have the advanced settings, so you can actually set up SOCD, things like that. And overall, I do feel like they did a great job with how the software does. You do have updates, and it does get updates. Like I had 2 updates while I was testing out and trying out this board, which is quite nice to see, meaning that they are working to make sure things are good and being updated and working well. Now, you do get your own configs here, right? This is going to be the profiles that you can choose, and you do have the polling rate changes, which is nice to see. Now you can go into their config library. They do have, saved settings that you can go and choose yourselves if you want to use it. They even have an AI coach, which is really interesting. You can do keyboard testing here as well. So you can test out to make sure all the keys are working, all the switches working. The AI coach, I'm actually really curious how this will work. It's supposed to like watch your games, I believe, while you have it going, and then give you feedback in terms of what you should change things, which is very interesting. I think if you are someone who really wants to in the future get serious in gaming and want to know like exact settings that you should say, then this might be very helpful for you, especially with the specific games that you're playing. And it has a bunch of choices here. I noticed that Apex Legends was not one of them. Now, in terms of the polling rate testing, so I use Keyboard Inspector to see what kind of polling rate we get. I feel like the polling rate tests are actually pretty decent. It doesn't give you the latency, but tells you the polling rate that it's getting. And as you can see here, with the scan rate, you're going to get higher numbers, right? You're going to be getting 8K and higher with the testing with this one. The biggest thing I want to test was make sure it does 1K. And the reason I do this is because some people's computers can't handle it. And when I change to 1K, it does actually change it, because some of the Hall effect boards doesn't really do it properly. So testing out here, you can actually see that it does get 1K, which is really great. I'm super glad they made sure to test this out and make it happen. Now, in terms of using it in Apex Legends, as you can see here, so of course, super glides is one of the important parts in terms of testing out Hall effect keyboards, and the reason being is that it has to be very accurate in terms of what you're pressing, so it has to be frame perfect. So the reason why Hall effect works really well for that frame perfect pressing is because you can set it up to be actuating exactly the way you want it to and the timing you want it to be, and then it allows you to really be able to use that specific advantage for yourself. And Apex Legends just has a lot of movement that requires that frame perfect pressing. Now you can see here I'm trying to practice super gliding with the board, and the reason I use a shotgun is because if I have a gold bow and pull off a super glide, it should auto reload and I can see it on the screen. So overall the board does feel quite quick and feels really nice to use. The metal keycaps doesn't feel very much of a hindrance at all in terms of the usage, in terms of gaming. It does have not a great smooth feel with the switches, but that's just the switches. Now, in terms of another benefit with Hall effect in Apex is that if you move in Apex, it does help with recoil smoothing, which is reducing the recoil. If you spam 80 AD with Hall effect boards as well and low actuation, it does help a little bit. Now, it's not as good as just moving, but you do have slight recoil smoothing that does occur with the Hall effect boards. So this is actually working quite well with this one. Now going into Valorant. So Valorant is a game that obviously people like to use Hall effect keyboards, which is going to be for Rappy Snappy. And as you can see here, when I'm pressing A and D, it's going to break, meaning that I fully stop before I can go into the next key input. And the reason why people like using Rappy Snappy or Snappy Tap or whatever they like to call it, it's going to be because it has a quick strafing, meaning that I can strafe a lot easier with the specific keys. Now, as you can see here, I'm not fully braking compared to when I didn't have it on, and I do move right away after. So there's gonna be a small break point, but then at least my movement goes really quick after, which means that you can actually maybe juke someone in terms of the strafing that you do in game. Now you're gonna have to practice this. Keep in mind, just because you have this setting does not make you the perfect strafing person in game. You still have to make sure to practice the specific settings and make sure that you are getting every timing right, so that when you shoot, the shots go off accurately. Now, using the actual skills in game as well, like how quick is it, those are also, again, slight benefits compared to using a mechanical keyboard, is just because you're going to actuate a little bit faster in terms of the skills you want to press. So does Hall effect really make you a better gamer? It just helps a little bit. If you're a professional, obviously it provides that a little bit more than others, but specifically if you have slower reaction times, at least you're able to react a little bit quicker with those actuations. Now, putting it into the spreadsheet, comparing it with all the other Hall effect boards out there. So in this specific section, we like to take a look to see what is it this board has above others. Here you can see that the layout is 64%. So it's a 60% layout with technically a 64 keys in here. So you have the arrow keys and a very small right shift. Keep in mind, small right shift, some people aren't going to like it. I actually hate it. It's really hard to type with, so keep in mind this if you are looking at this board. Now it has a nice aluminum case. I think this case is probably one of the best cases I've seen recently in terms of pre-built keyboards. Very, very nice. The switch itself is the Poseidon switch. It's just okay. We'll go over it a little bit later. The pricing wise is not cheap. It's $179, but when you consider the value of this board with what you're getting with the aluminum keycaps, alu case, and the switches that you get with this, because those switches aren't cheap either, with the nice PCB, overall, the value-wise, you do get quite a decent amount. Like if you're looking at other boards here, right? You have another 64%, that's over $200. Some of the boards, of course, are going to be cheaper. They're more budget. Some aren't aluminum cases. Some are going to be plastic cases. Really comparing the price value-wise, you do get a lot with this board. Now, please keep in mind this very specific thing, guys, with Hall effect keyboards. Performance is not going to be crazy important to you and software-wise if you are just a regular user. The reason I say this is because Hall effect keyboards is all very similar. Like once you have a software that actually lets you actuate something, it's more than enough. Like you set it up, you're good to go. You might change things time to time and RGB, but it's not going to be super important. Now overall, the sound profile of this keyboard, it's not the greatest. It has a hollow sound to it. I didn't really like how it sounded so hollow with the metal keycaps, but it's actually a factor of the metal keycaps and the specific switches. Using different switches sounded a lot better. Now in terms of the software, honestly the software is okay. I think overall you do get everything you need with the software, and you're able to, make settings and changes and do all of that, and it's more than enough for most regular users. It's not the perfect software, but it's decent. Now in terms of the sound wise, honestly, if you're very particular about sound like mechanical keyboards, this probably is not going to do it for you. But if you change the keycaps, it does get a lot better. I think this board is standing in a very decent spot. In terms of just pure value, like material cost, switch cost, keycap cost, this one does actually have a very good value to the board. Now, there are some caveats with it, as I mentioned, with where the USB port is placed, which means you can't really take this PCB out and place it in a different case either. Maybe Chilkey can provide one of those converter kits to be able to allow you to do that, because the PCB they say is supposed to be a very decent PCB out there. Now the software is okay. It is supposed to be a skinned software, so there is a new Star software that's going around that a lot of brands are using, and they did skin it for their own purpose. There are some bugs in it, but it still does work for the purposes you want it to. Now, we have to keep in mind for certain things with software. I think majority of people, this is just my opinion, majority of people will set up their board once and then they won't really go into the software many times after that. Like you'll go in here and there, make updates, but not really make a lot of changes. So if a software is able to do the bare minimum in terms of setting it up and have a very simple UI, I think it does the job. It would be nice though if UIs were just a little bit better and easier of use, of course, for those who maybe want to or need to change up things more frequently. That is just my opinion in terms of where a software should be. But overall, when this board does go on sale, I think you're going to get a lot of value out of this board. Like it's quite nice. I know that on Taobao, you can actually get it for a decent price right now because of their whole sales. And in terms of vendors as well as from Chilkey, you can definitely check it out for yourselves. The link will be in the description. I think overall, some people are really going to enjoy this board, just overall with the aesthetics as well as the sound that it makes. So go check it out for yourselves. Please check out the other videos I got, and I'll have to catch you guys next time.